So last time we started talking a little bit about sampling theory. Did I remind anybody to tell me to talk about something at the beginning today? No, maybe, possibly. All right. So something we were talking about at the end of class last time was this idea about sampling theory, where we need to make sure we are sampling the data often enough so that we don't lose data. We can look at an extreme example. If something happens every 1 second and we sample it every 5 minutes, there's a lot of data in the middle that we're missing, correct? So we need to make sure that our sample rate, the amount of time, how often we are reading the data, matches up, well, let's just say, is at least as often as the data is presented. Probably needs to be faster than that. So every time we sample a signal, we get a value. We get the last value that was put on there. The more often we sample, the higher the sampling rate. Higher frequencies require a high sample rate, otherwise data is lost, which is called aliasing. Aliasing, we'd have a whole bunch of duplicate values from the last value that was put onto the line. When you see the wheels on a spinning tire seemingly going slower than they should be, your eyes are only sampling so often and they can't keep up with the actual RPMs of the tire. So we've seen this before, right? Bike tires or car tires, as they're passing you, you know, they seem like they're almost in like stop motion. And that's why the spinners really play with you, because they don't spin anywhere near as fast, right? The spinners kind of go really slow, so your eyes are actually catching those with the wheel around it you're missing. Because our eyes are sampling the scene around us, but at only a certain rate. And if something is happening faster than that, then we miss out. A good example of this, and this is very related to technology, if you've ever seen on a video camera on TV, one of those old CRT monitors, what do you notice when you see that on a TV or through a video camera? What do you notice about an older CRT monitor? You typically see the line scanning down. Okay, those monitors are, some of them, the older ones, were single scan. Most of them were dual scan monitors. So they had a refresh rate. And the refresh rate basically is something that swept down and updated the pixels. But this happens so quickly that our eyes don't pick up on it. But the camera can. So the camera was actually was sampling the scene at a higher rate than our eyes were. That's why you could see that on the camera. Now, one thing you ran into with those older monitors is even though you didn't recognize that was happening, your eyes were experiencing that movement. So that's why a lot of people would get eye fatigue sitting at older CRT monitors. Any of you in here ever worked for a really, really long time at a CRT monitor? Okay, so and if you sat there, your eyes would start burning after a period of time. Or if you sat in front of a laptop, a modern day laptop, so in the early days of laptops, you also had the dual scan problem. Then you went to these active displays. Now they just don't even talk about it anymore. Now they're all not scanning. They're very much on a pixel by pixel refresh rate. But if you were to work at a laptop, modern day laptop, for the same amount of time, your eyes wouldn't be nearly as fatigued. So they're not having to do all that extra work in the background. But that would be an example of sampling. So, given that, why do our computer screens refresh so often? So let's get back to some of our questions with gaming, video games and stuff like that. So we talk about our graphics cards. Now, your monitor, how many of you have a fairly nice monitor for your computer? Okay, how many of you have a monitor that's operating at 60 hertz? Anybody with 120 hertz? Okay. Nobody has more than, anybody have 240? You have 144? Oh, that's like a special gaming monitor for the...
I know, it's weird.
So weird. That's a weird number.
It is. It should be a 120.
So, 120 hertz. Well, we've learned some things about hertz in here. That would be 1 update per second. So 120 means that screen is refreshing 120 times per second. Most monitors, like for instance, I think the screen in this laptop is a 60 hertz monitor. Most of you who have a computer monitor, an LCD type monitor, is probably running at 60 hertz. Now, how many of you have a graphics card that can do more than 60 frames a second? What about more than 120 frames a second? More than 144 frames a second? Huh? Certain games, okay. So now,
Legoland doesn't count.
okay. So let's use this example. You have a 60 hertz monitor. Okay, you have a 60 hertz monitor, and you have a graphics card that can do 200 frames a second. Just throwing a much larger number out there. So now you have a graphics card that can show images faster than your monitor can show images, which is faster than your eyes can read images. Isn't that kind of funny? Like, look, my graphics card can just pump this out at 200 frames a second. My monitor cannot take that. Okay, so my monitor is having to buffer. The graphics card is having to buffer it because your monitor cannot accept images that fast. Your monitor isn't keeping up with your graphics card. Okay, then your eyes really suck. Human eyes see about, let's call it 40 to 50 frames a second.
So we need the eye.
So we need the eye. The Apple eye. The Apple eye. The eye would be better, a better name. Isn't it funny when they first announced the iPad, there was all the funny jokes and stuff like that about maxi pads and stuff like that. And now we don't even think about it anymore. It's just become part of the vernacular. But do you remember that when they first announced the iPad? Everyone was saying how stupid of a name that was, and we forgot. Now it's just part of normal speech. So I think we should go with the II. It'll be a little weird at first, and then it'll stick. Okay, so why do we need that graphics card that can actually output frames faster than our monitor can take them? And then why do we need a monitor that can display stuff faster than our eyes can see them? Did you ever think about that? Is anybody else looking at the monitor except human eyes? That's the purpose of the monitor, right? To display pretty images and stuff like that to people. Why does our monitor? Why did you buy a 144 hertz monitor?
Smoother picture.
Smoother picture? Tell me about that.
The refresh rate, I know when you go with your mouse, the cursor on a 60 hertz, you can see it jump.
Okay.
And the one I have, it's smooth. There's no jumping or anything.
Okay.
So, the flow of the game is locked.
All right. How many of you have purchased a big screen TV in the last 3 years? Or have been involved in a purchase of a big screen TV in the last 2 or 3 years? So one of the decisions you have to make when you go and buy a big screen TV, they probably don't even sell 60 hertz anymore. That most of them start off at 120 hertz now. Okay, but you maybe had to make the decision between 60 hertz, 120 hertz, and maybe 240 hertz. And the more hertz, the more it hurts in the pocket, right? Okay. Huh?
It's all about the 4K.
4K that's a different measurement.
Yeah, I know, but
So, why would you get 240 hertz? Go ahead.
Well, there's things that will slow down the refresh rate. If the computer has to do a lot of different processes at one time.
I'm talking about the TV.
Well, I mean,
It'd be the same argument, but go ahead.
Yeah, even with that, I mean, you're gonna have a bunch of different things maybe going on in your screen. Maybe you have two windows open. One half is one thing, one half is another thing. Having multiple things on your computer that's displaying stuff will slow down the computer's output of the refresh rate to maybe just
No.
no.
No, modern screens are all active matrix, so each pixel refreshes on its own. It's on its own. Human eye can pick up, let's just, for our we're going to say we have great eyes. We're going to say 50 hertz. We can see it. I would highly doubt any of you in here could see it at 50 hertz. But let's just say. I definitely can't. I'm at 7 hertz. No, I literally play golf with pink golf balls because I can't see them. It's that bad. No, but no, I'm probably more than 7 hertz. I'm probably like at 34 hertz.
7 hertz, you're getting down to slideshow.
Yeah, life is a slideshow to me. But let's just say we're seeing at 50 hertz. Why would we need a monitor capable of 240 hertz?
Like big numbers. I know with some, with like movies and TV, the frame rates sometimes, at least, so I think the standard movie is shot 24 frames per second.
Okay.
This isn't necessarily why you would need 240, but if you only have 60 hertz, it doesn't divide evenly. And I know that can cause some jaggedness or like not very good motion interpolation.
Okay. Well, so he kind of pointed out I mean, you did it more in computer terms when your mouse moves across the screen, that if you move your mouse across the screen really, really quickly, you're not seeing your mouse at each point as you're moving it. If you were really to pay attention to it, you'd see your mouse skipping across the screen. It wouldn't cover every pixel because part of when it's updating, that mouse is missing frames. The faster the refresh rate of the monitor, the smoother that mouse will appear across the line. Even though you're only sampling it so quickly, you get off. So when your eye samples the screen, if the mouse isn't necessarily showing up in that particular frame, you might miss it. Does that make sense? So even though the frame rate is way, 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 way faster than the human eye can see, you might happen to sample somewhere in between. So the faster it is displaying the images, the less likely it is for you to miss something, less likely it is for it to be jumpy. The people who get the really fast refresh rates on big screen TVs, typically the selling point for them is action movies and sports. Okay, so if you get a really low refresh rate, let's say you get a 60 hertz a big screen TV and you're a big football fan, something like that. Passes might seem a little jagged. I mean, we're not talking about like it's not going to look like they're playing, cartoon football. It's not going to be complete crap. But if you were comparing a 60 hertz TV next to a 240 hertz TV in professional sports, you very well might notice a difference in smoothness. Or at the very least, you might kind of have a sense that the picture is jumpy. You might not necessarily be able to pick something out in there, but you might have a sense of it. That has to do with this idea of sampling. Your eyes are sampling so often. 50 times a second our eyes are sampling for us good eye samplers. Is that phrasing? No, I think we're good. I had a really good phrasing at the grocery store the other day. My wife called me on the way out to the car. We were at Metro Mart, and this is on recording, so this is like confessions. We were at Metro Mart, and you know how they ask you if you have your discount card thing? And I had it out to begin with, and at the end, you know how they kind of have the habit where they ask you if you, like I gave it to the person before we started, but at the end, he still asked me for it, and I had already put it away, and he said, the computer still asked me for it, so I gave it to him. I said, so then as I'm like explaining, I said, well, I had it out, but I don't know if I gave it to you. So something along those lines. My wife just starts busting up laughing, standing next to me.
There is plenty of phrasing in your description.
I know, I was like trying not to. This is what happens with society today.
I think you would find a way, no matter what time of society you were in, to corrupt it.
Well, that's probably true, but there's so much innuendo in our vernacular today that almost anything you say can be like twisted into something inappropriate. You know what I mean? It's like
the Who's Line game. You add, you know what I mean, to the end of the sentence, and it becomes.
I guess that's true. I never really thought about it like that. What was I talking about? Oh, the II. So this kind of gets back to these questions when we start dealing with quality of our computer screens, things like that. Now we get into a kind of a separate measurement. So, you know, these, David mentioned these these 4K displays, quad HD displays, as some places are calling it. And most of them have really tight pixel densities. Is that freezing? No. This is driving myself crazy now. The new iPhone screen, which is a lower resolution than I think the Galaxy 4 Note, which is a quad HD. I think the new iPhone has 400. The iPhone, the Plus, the 6 Plus, has 401 pixels per inch. The other one has 326. The iPhone 6 has 326 pixels per inch. I want to say that the Galaxy Note 4 has like 520 some pixels per inch, something like that. 524 pixels per inch. Let's just assume that's correct. The human eye can see around 300 pixels per inch. A good human eye can see about 300 pixels per inch. Well, why do we need so many pixels?
We're hoping that by the time these get to be mainstream, that the human will evolve so that we get super eyes.
Well, but can we make that same? I mean, so you're right, but can we make the same argument as we did with the Hertz? Is that still a sampling rate issue? When we have our TV sets or our computer screens updating 240 times every second to hopefully not miss the human eye sampling, because we're all on our little internal game clock, if you will, and our eyes are sampling, hoping that we don't miss a frame in there. And the idea is that if the TV is outputting images so quickly, the chances of us missing a frame or seeing flicker, you called it smoothness, which I think is a pretty accurate description. The chance goes way, 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 way down, correct? At the very least, the chance of us coming close to noticing goes way, way down. I think at some point, I think a lot of times people can't necessarily tell the difference between 120 hertz and 240 hertz for TVs. I think you'd have to get a very specialized scene, some really high action scene in a movie or something like that in order to tell the difference between those two. I think it's pretty common for even just reasonable, just kind of run-of-the-mill action movies or sports to see the difference between 60 hertz and 120 hertz. So I think if you're ever in the market for a TV, at least based on our current, this current stuff that's on TV, if there's a huge price jump to go from 120 to 240, it's probably not worth it. Going from 60 to 120 is probably worth it. And like I said, I don't even think they really sell 60 anymore unless it's like on one of those budget pleasers, like a 42-inch, LCD for $49 or something like that. That's probably 60 hertz. And doesn't come with a power or a box.
$49. That's a good deal.
Yeah. I can deal with a little bit of sketchy football for $49. So that's clearly a sampling issue, but what about over on the pixels per inch? So our human eye can only see about 300 pixels per inch. Pixel being a little dot of light. So you get you take 1 inch of space and you cram 300 pixels in there. And that's about the limit of what the human eye can see. If you put more than 300 pixels in there, we won't be able to differentiate one pixel from another. Right around 300 is where we can tell. For those of you who have one of the older iPads, or iPhone 3GS, or not the Air, but the iPad before that, even the higher definition iPads, they had a very high pixel density, but not quite 300. If you looked very, very, very closely, you could detect pixels. If you have a newer smartphone, I doubt very much you could detect pixels on it. The example I used to do with people with the iPhone 3GS versus the iPhone 4 is when they introduced that Retina displays, I had them go to their the phone app and look at like the number 2, because you had white text on a black background, and you can see all the pixels that make up the number 2. If you look at your cell phone today, If you have a newer phone, I bet you that you can't see pixels on your screen. It's no matter how hard you look. So let's see. That's is that a
S5.
Galaxy?
Yeah,
Which one?
S5.
Okay. Yeah, no way you're going to see pixels. You can lie to me and say you do, but there's no way your eyes are that good. That's got to be, I think it's at least 326 ppi. It might be higher.
He's looking for dead pixels.
Okay, we can't see them. Is that a sampling problem? The pixels are there, right? Let's just say it's 400 pixels. So he has the iPhone 6 Plus. I think that has less than 400, but even if it is 400, it's high. It's higher than you need for your eyes. But let's just say it's 400 pixels per inch. Which phone do you have?
5.
Oh, you can't see pixels.
I see that.
What?
I see the pixels.
No, you don't. It's like a joke image.
Sort of.
Pixelated numbers.
Well, within the pixelated numbers, you won't be able to see pixels. So the question is that sampling? Do those pixels, does the refresh rate of your screen have anything to do with our ability to see those pixels? So the refresh rate on his Galaxy phone is, I don't know, probably at least 60 hertz. If it was faster, would you? If it was slower, would you be able to see those pixels? What if the refresh rate was 0? It was just on. It was a static picture. On. So all the pixels lit up to form a single picture and then never refreshed. They were just on. Would you be able to see the individual pixels? That make it easier? So does that have anything to do with sampling? What if we approach the problem from the other side? Let's speed up our eyes. Our eyes can now sample at 600 hertz. Hertz, life would be a gigantic headache. Like literally. It would literally be a huge headache. Everything you did would just kill you. So now your eyes can sample at 600 hertz. Would you be able to see those pixels? Why?
Because there's still too many in too small an area.
Okay, so what's the problem associated with us seeing those pixels?
The detail your eye can see.
Yeah, the quality of the instrument's measurement. It has nothing to do with the speed at which we're measuring. We just can't measure at that level of detail. So then the question is, why do we need more than 300 pixels per inch? Assuming you have an image taken at a high enough megapixel rate. So megapixels are the number of data points that make up the image. So assuming you took a high enough megapixel picture to truly take advantage of a high quality screen, would you be able to detect the difference of the same image on a 326 pixels per inch screen versus a 500 pixel per inch screen? Assuming the image had a minimum of 600 pixels per inch in terms of actual data. Would there be a quality difference? Physically, is there a quality difference? Yeah, physically there is. If you have an image that has 600 pixels per inch, and you have one screen capable of showing 500 pixels per inch and another screen capable of showing 326 pixels per inch, the 500 pixels per inch screen will be a higher quality picture, correct? Your human eye won't be able to discern individual pixels, but will we perceive a clearer picture? We will. We will perceive a clearer picture. All right, so is it worthwhile having better quality screens? From a clarity perspective, yes. Now, is there a point when having a higher quality screen is actually going in the wrong direction? So, as we see pixels per inch go up, we also see resolution going up. And larger resolution means what? That's definitely true. Yeah, it's definitely true. Higher resolution typically means more expensive. But what do we gain as users with higher resolution?
Bigger picture size?
Okay, I think you're right, but you're explaining it, well, you didn't really explain anything. Tell me about that. To me, it sounds like you said it backwards, but go ahead and just explain it.
Well, you have to fit so much information on that pixel, so therefore you need a bigger image or a way to fill that information in. So either it's gonna appear smaller, I guess, in a way.
Well, let me ask you this. If we have in a higher resolution screen, can we fit more crap on the screen than we can on a lower resolution screen?
Yeah.
Okay, so we have, in the same physical space, if we have two 17-inch monitors, the physical space, and one of the monitors has twice the resolution of the other one, that means we can fit twice as many pixels on that screen, right? Now, then you have the physical boundaries of, if you have the same resolution on a 17-inch screen as you do on a 30-inch screen, things are going to be larger on the 30-inch screen because it's physically bigger. So something that, let's just say it was a 15-inch screen versus a 30 and it literally scaled 50%. So things that were at a 15-inch screen at resolution X would be twice as physically big on a 30-inch screen at the same resolution. So higher resolutions tend to let us get more things on the screen at once. Resolution being a measurement of number of pixels. So high definition is 1920 by 1080 for standard high definition. Okay? So multiply those two numbers together, that's the total number of pixels to make up a Blu-ray high definition image. And you take that times 60 frames a second or something like that. Okay? And then the larger the physical size of the monitor, the less you have to deal with high resolution turning into really tiny things. Okay? Now, is there a point when high resolution becomes problematic?
The battery can't handle it.
Okay. I'm talking more visually. Certainly, is there a point when you have, if your screen is super high resolution but it has 15-minute battery life, is that worth it? Probably not. So, you're right in that case. But I'm talking more from a visual. If we didn't have to worry about battery life, is having a higher resolution screen always better?
Not if you want a smaller screen.
Okay, why?
Because if you have a small screen and you just put in pixels and pixels and pixels and pixels and pixels, and then it's going to condense more and more and more.
Yeah, everything's going to be so tiny it's not going to be usable.
Yeah.
So physically the data is there. But if you have a full HD display on an 11.6-inch screen, let's say, which is actually going to get kind of interesting because they're starting to talk about coming out with the Retina display MacBook Airs. One of the MacBook Airs is an 11.6-inch display. Really nice laptop, but that's a lot of pixels in a really small screen for a desktop-based operating system. Have you noticed on our smartphones that the operating system looks a little bit different? It's made for smaller screen sizes, not these big screens. It's designed for that. So higher resolution isn't always better. So that's why things are getting a little funny as we start going to these now, 4K screens on our phones. There's a point where they have to scale all the graphics up to make it look right. So fine, you have a screen capable of showing 4K, but the content isn't at 4K. The content is at normal HD quad scaled. So it looks the same. The quality of it is a measurement of pixels per inch. Something like that. Now, an interesting thing, and maybe we'll start class, somebody remind me, we'll go down and look at it at the beginning of class next time. Or actually, let's just finish this discussion and maybe we'll finish up about 5 minutes early. And I want to walk down the hall here and we can look at it. But we have a newer Mac Pro, one of the ones that look like batteries. If you've seen them, like a tubular thing. And it has a 4K screen attached to it in our room down there. And I find the monitor is nearly unusable. It's about, I think it's a 30-inch display. Maybe a 32-inch display. But it's a 4K 32-inch display. I mean, there is literally travel time to get your mouse from one side of the screen to the other. I'm not kidding. This is like a $3,000 monitor. Is that usable? Why would somebody, I mean, first of all, we all want that monitor, right? If somebody just handed it to you, like, cool. I can turn the resolution up or down, I guess. It's like, yeah, I can do 4K, but I just have it set at 2K. You know, because I started falling asleep as I looked from one side of my monitor to the other, since I was doing the sway back and forth. But there does become a point where the resolution is no longer beneficial to us. So one side of it is when the screen's too small for the resolution. So yeah, we can fit a whole bunch of stuff on our screen, but it gets to the point where we can't see it. Right? Same resolution on a smaller screen, things are going to be physically smaller. So this is a Retina display MacBook Pro. I think this is 2560 by 1536, somewhere in that range. Pretty high resolution screen. This is probably about as high a resolution I would want on this size screen. This is a 15-inch or 15.4-inch screen. The Mac operating system kind of optimizes itself for that screen size because they made the screen. When I install Windows 8 on here, I have to tone the resolution down. Windows 8's unusable at full resolution. It's not buggy or anything. You just can't see. And maybe some of you that have, that aren't living life as a slideshow, maybe be able to see it better than I can. But I've worn trifocal since I was 18, so one talent I do have is I can deal with pretty small type on a monitor. I can't deal with moving objects, hence the pink golf balls. But in terms of seeing things on the screen, like reading really tiny type, I'm pretty good with that. Because I have the lower part of my glasses are basically like microscopes. But that would be about as much as I'd want to go. And so, it's just a matter of time. Maybe it's next year, maybe it's the year after that when Apple releases their new MacBook Pro. And I don't think they're going to go much bigger than 15 inches because they already did away with their 17-inch screens. So you're going to have the 15.4-inch MacBook Pro with a 4K display on it. I don't know who can use it. It's going to be real borderline. So it is kind of an interesting thing to consider. Those two separate things. You have sampling rate. So that's how fast things are refreshing when we talk about our screens. And then you have quality of the measuring instrument. And then we have a third level, which is end user experience. More pixels, more pixel density isn't necessarily a better end user experience. For instance, I think when 4K TVs become mainstream, which right now they're kind of the cool new thing, but if you were in the market for a new TV, because there's not a lot of 4K content out there, chances are you'd probably get a pretty nice 1080p TV for a lot less than you're going to pay for a 4K TV that you can't do anything with. There's like, 2 sources of 4K? Like literally 2 total sources, not like 2 places, like 2 sources of 4K. So you really can't take advantage of it. You can't even fully take advantage of high definition 1080p right now. You know, the only things that can take advantage of it are Blu-ray, which is natively 1080p. Some of your gaming systems, not even all those games are true 1080p. A lot of them are upscaled. They were 720p games that are just double pixeled. And some on-demand channels through your cable company. Actually, probably not even cable. Cable doesn't do any 1080p, but some of your satellite providers, DirecTV, Dish Network, can probably do some on-demand stuff at 1080p because this is broadcast differently. Yeah.
What's the difference between 1080p and 1080i?
1080p is 1920 by 1080. 1080i is 1368 by 768. So it's about twice the resolution. 1080p. It's a number of pixels.
So why do they call 1080i 1080 when there's nothing to do with 1080?
Well, 1080p is progressive scan. 1080i is interlaced. So it's half the number of pixels because what they do is they interlace the lines with each other. So only half the lines are updating every refresh rate. No, actually I'm lying. Half the lines are downloaded at a time. So it takes 2 refresh rates to color the whole screen at that resolution. So it's half the resolution to give you a clear picture, but it also takes half the bandwidth. Where 1080p uses all the pixels. I mean, if you do the math on it, it's 1920 times 1080. That's the total number of pixels on a full high definition 1080p TV. 2.073 million pixels, right? 1368 by 768 is about half, about 1 million pixels. Half the resolution. And what we usually consider high definition for television stations is 1080i. So when you see the guy, you can see their razor burn, the soccer players and stuff. That's 1080i. 1080p, you can see their heartbeat. 4K, you can smell them. It's the natural evolution. At 5K, I guess you become them. It's a quantum thing, I guess. So that's even another level. Now we are talking about delivering the content. So we're starting to talk about these 4K TVs. Well, 4K, for our average TV show, is an hour long. So let's say it's an hour long. What's the resolution of 4K? It's 4096 by 2568. Is that right? Somebody here. $38.40 by 2160. So 3840 times 2160 is 8.29 million pixels. So 4 times the resolution of 1080p. That's where the 4K comes from. And so now we have that, and it's that times how many frames a second is our average TV signal. Let's just say it's 30 frames a second. So times 30 for TV. So that's the number of total pixels per second. Now our pixels are probably 32 bits each for true color, right? So that's times 32. That's bits. Divided by 8 is bytes. Divided by 1024 is kilobytes. Divided by 1024 is megabytes. Divided by 1024 is gigabytes. So a little bit less than 1 gigabyte per second to broadcast in 4K. So that means a 60-minute show is 55.6 gigabytes of total broadcast.
That's 60-second show.
Huh?
That's a 60-second.
Oh, it is a 60-second show.
my God.
Yeah, thank you, because I did the other, 60 minutes, there we go.
3 terabytes.
3 terabytes, 3 terabyte show. So imagine renting your 4K movie off iTunes. Well, I'm about to get on my the airplane with my 4K iPad. Gonna rent I don't know what, Days of Thunder or something like that, some old Tom Cruise car movie in 4K, remastered in 4K. You have off-site storage. You're carrying a hard drive with you. I divided the movie up into 6 iPads. It brings a whole new thing to AirPlay.
And done.
So as you can see, 4K becomes a problem. 1080p is still a problem. True 1080p, that's 1920 by 1080, number of pixels, times 30 frames a second, times 32 bits per pixel, divided by 8 bytes, divided by 1024 kilobytes, divided by 1024 megabytes, divided by 1024 gigabytes. A fourth of that, right? Times 60, that's our minute-long show, is 13.9 gigabytes. Times 60, 834 gigabytes for an hour-long broadcast of 1080p. Now, how many of you have run into issues with your internet service providers where they cap your bandwidth? Keep in mind, anybody who raises their hands are also telling us that you heavily use BitTorrent. What do most internet service providers, not cell phone, I'm talking about like Time Warner Cable or AT&T, what do they typically cap you at per month for total bandwidth?
Does Time Warner even have a cap?
None of them have an official cap. They do have a cap where they warn you.
Have you reached that cap?
Really, this is why, no, I have not, but this is really why you have all this net neutrality talk. And you have places contacting these cable companies, content providers, wanting to pay for the right to pay for your bandwidth so your bill doesn't go up. Net neutrality is a very interesting problem because on one hand, as consumers, we don't want to pay more for our internet bills, right? We'd actually prefer to pay less and get more. That's the human way, right? It's like, wait a minute. Right now I'm paying $60 a month for 50 megabit. How about I give you $30 a month for 100? That's a deal, right? So we want to pay less and get more. Well, the cable company wants to cap us because it costs them money to provide us the bandwidth. So when we're constantly, how many of you have switched over to Netflix away from, just using Netflix as an example, something like Netflix instead of cable? So you're not paying a monthly bill for Uverse or Time Warner. Instead, you digest all of your media, all of your entertainment over the internet. A lot of people have, or at least have moved towards that, correct? So all you're doing is you're leveraging your internet connection more and more and more. Time Warner or AT&T, they're not getting any more cash out of you. Your cable bill, your cable internet bill is still the same as it was 6 months ago. You're using it 9 times more than you were then because you're using it for all your entertainment. So shouldn't we feel bad for them? The answer is probably a little. We tend to not. We tend to, they have enough money. Okay? But really, they are getting the short end of the stick. Because you have these providers like Netflix that they don't have control over. I mean, everybody in this industry is making a lot of money, so let's not feel too bad for them. Okay? But they are doing this for profit. It is a capitalist society. Okay? So, but we should feel a little bit bad for them because they are stuck where they really can't raise your rates because you won't pay them. And somebody else will come and undercut them. But at the same time, they're having to provide that bandwidth for you to binge watch X-Files. So when you watch an entire season of a TV show on Netflix in an afternoon.
In HD.
Yeah, but even HD, it's a dumbed down HD. Yeah, it's 720p at best. But
Netflix?
Yeah.
No. You can go 180. You can 1080.
Netflix won't scale it to 1080 unless you have a very, very fast internet connection.
You can force it.
Oh, with a longer buffer time.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can see that. But on a slower internet connection, you might have a 15-minute buffer
Yeah, but you can
where
still,
you're sitting there for 15 minutes waiting for your show to start because it has to halfway download just to keep up. But the point is that you're using a lot of bandwidth. So we haven't even gotten to the point where we can broadcast high definition to the masses. We can download high definition. We can buffer it. So let's say that you and I are both watching the X-Files marathon in high definition at the same time. Well, those are coming as two separate streams. So I'm downloading at 834 gigabytes an hour. If we go all the way up to 1080p, it's not at 1080p. It's 1080i at best. No way Netflix does 1080p.
You can get it.
There's no way.
You can do it.
All right.
Yeah, there's only like 2 shows that do 4K, Breaking Bad and House of Cards. It does 4K? Yeah.
There's no way.
Yeah, they advertise it that that's what they're streaming it at. You have to have fast internet connection for them to even consider.
But that's obscene.
I don't think you can even do that on Google Fiber.
There's no way. I'll give you extra credit if you can prove that to me.
Well, I tried.
If any of you can prove that you can literally stream 1080p off Netflix, you can have. I'll give you.
1080p, I can.
That's a lot. That's still.
1080p, I don't think you can do 4K, but 1080p, I'm pretty sure.
I
you can
think
do
you're
it.
maxing at 1080i. I actually think it might be 720p. I'd be surprised if you can prove to me that they can do 1080p streaming. So take a
You
look.
can't do it with this internet.
Well, just take a look. I'm never wrong, remember?
Of course.
But in any case, we can tell we're dealing with large amounts of data, correct? Becomes a very, very interesting problem. Because 834 gigabytes an hour for 1080p, that's a lot of data. I mean, so if we divide that up, so here, that went, let's get this back down to megabytes per second times 60 for a minute times 60 for an hour. That's 854,000 megabytes in an hour. Well, I mean, how much? I have a 50 megabit per second internet connection, so I can do about 6.5 megabytes a second. So if I divide that by 6.5, that's my number of seconds it would take me to download that movie. Divided by 60, that's my number of minutes to download it in its entirety.
Netflix will give you 7 gigabytes per hour, and then it'll just cap you off. So whatever that is.
7 gigabytes per hour is not going to get you 1080p.
Not on a 45-minute show.
Let's see. That's megabytes. That's gigabytes. That's 60. That's 43. Wait, hold on, am I missing one? Okay, so 0.23 gigabytes per second times 60 seconds, that's 13 gigabytes. So at 1080p, you can do about 30 seconds. They'll give you 7 gigabytes an hour.
But are you considering the fact that...
So we can throw...
Are you considering the fact that they're using the codecs to kind of...
compress it. So we can talk about compression there, but if we can do uncompressed video...
Oh, no, there's no way that...
Well, no, I'm just saying, if We can only do 30 seconds of uncompressed. It seems extremely unlikely to me that we can do 43 minutes of compressed at that quality level. It just doesn't seem doable to me if they're capping you at 7. Yeah, it's an interesting problem. But regardless, the lesson to take from this is when you're streaming all this data, you're putting a lot of tension on your internet connection. And buffering just makes humans happier. You're still moving all that data. You know, when Netflix takes a minute and a half to start because it's downloading the first part of the movie so that it can continue to download in the background without you being interrupted because you think the show is just playing live, you're still moving all that data. That's still taking up bandwidth that your provider has to give you. So something interesting to consider. So understand, the moral of today's lecture was the difference between sample rate, instrument quality for measurement, okay, and then also end user experience. All right, so what I want to do here in the last couple of minutes, I'll stop the recording. I want to walk down, I want to show you on this 4K screen what this thing looks like.